Good evening, I'm Diane in Hong Kong and you're watching ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Judge discharges jurors after they failed to reach a majority verdict in the bribery trial of ex-Chief Executive Donald Tsang. Tensions high on the Korean peninsula ahead of Donald Trump's first visit to Asia. And the return of the Q. Apple's iPhone X finally goes on sale around the world, and it could mean $1 trillion for the company. We'll begin tonight with Donald Tsang's bribery case. In a surprise move, the judge has discharged the jury after it failed to reach a verdict following more than 13 hours of deliberation. This comes after the 8 jurors announced no one is willing to budge on their stance, and further talks would not change this. After consulting with the prosecution and defense counsels, the judge acknowledged the tough duty the jury panel had before sending them home. The next step will be discussed in court on Monday. Weary Tsang met the media afterwards.
I want to thank Hong Kong people for the care they've shown me over the years. But as the court case isn't over yet, please understand that I can't say much. I just want to say that my family's been through a lot, both mentally and physically, over the past 5 years, and we are very tired.
Well, the judge of Donald Tsang's corruption case, as we just mentioned, will decide what the next step will be on Monday. But now let's take a look back at this case that has stunned the city with Evelyn Alone.
Now, Donald Tsang is no stranger to the inside of a courtroom. This is the second time the former chief executive has gone on trial over bribery allegations. Back in February, Donald Tsang was found guilty of misconduct in public office and was slapped with a 20-month jail sentence. A jury found him guilty of concealing private rental negotiations with property tycoon Bill Wong over a Shenzhen penthouse. At the same time, Tsang approved a digital broadcasting license for the now-defunct radio company Wave Media, in which Wong was a major shareholder. But after 2 months behind bars, Tsang was granted bail pending an appeal against his conviction. This time round, Tsang is being accused of accepting an advantage as the chief executive. He is being accused of accepting free renovations for the penthouse, totaling 3.8 million Hong Kong dollars in total, and in return, being favorably disposed to the radio station.
To the controversy over the cross-border rails joint checkpoint plan, and there's been a back-down of sorts from the chief executive. Carrie Lam is walking back threats to push forward with a co-location plan without the support of LegCo. But she did slam opposition lawmakers for trying to filibuster a non-binding motion 2 days in a row. That motion now won't be discussed again until mid-November. Lam last week threatened to bring the contentious joint immigration plan directly to Beijing, but hopes her new stance will stop opponents wasting valuable time.
I feel very sad, very disappointed, and very frustrated. As many members in society have told me, they are very hopeful about this term of the Hong Kong SAR government. They really want us to do a lot of things for the people of Hong Kong, and hence in my maiden policy address, I have outlined no less than 200 initiatives that we want to pursue. But if the Legislative Council is not possible to conduct its normal business, then the chances of our taking forward these efforts will be significantly compromised.
Pro-establishment lawmakers aren't letting up on the pan-Democrats, though. DAB lawmakers Elizabeth Quat and Anne Chang filed a police report against the opposition lawmakers' behaviour during yesterday's meeting on the joint immigration issue. They're basing their complaint on the LegCo Powers and Privileges Ordinance, which criminalises the creation of disturbance that interrupts LegCo meetings. Pro-democracy lawmaker Alvin Yeung, a lawyer by profession, called the move extremely creative.
Those who make these suggestions have nothing better to do, and I would invite them to have a better understanding of the law, especially on the relevant legislations. This ordinance is supposed to be a protection of the legislators. This ordinance is not supposed to be a weapon against the opposition members.
Meantime, the chief executive now has a complete cabinet with 2 final appointments. Ho Chiu-ping, a former News and Public Affairs Deputy Director at Commercial Radio, will assist the Financial Secretary. And Kelvin Cheng, meanwhile, takes on an assistant role to the Secretary for Food and Health. Cheng is a former manager at the Hospital Authority. They both start work next Monday. Elsewhere, and ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's much-anticipated trip to Asia, Ivanka Trump has begun her tour in Japan. The first daughter met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as part of a three-day visit to the country. The two attended the World Assembly for Women earlier in the day, where they gave speeches on women's empowerment. The meeting comes on the heels of a flurry of activity on the Korean peninsula, including a show of military force. Grace Lee has more.
Just days before Donald Trump's visit to Asia, tensions on the Korean peninsula are once again rising fast. Seoul launching a live-fire exercise with a range of missiles on Thursday as U.S. bombers fly through Korean skies, accompanied by fighter jets from South Korea and Japan. And according to experts, the North might be planning some activity of its own. South Korea's spy agency says it spotted movement at one of Kim Jong-un's research facilities, fueling speculation that Pyongyang could launch another missile in the near future, possibly during Trump's visit to Seoul. North Korea hasn't tested any missiles since its latest and largest launch in September, making these past few months the longest lull this year. South Korean intelligence says the nuclear site might have been damaged during that test, which triggered aftershocks. But Seoul expects Pyongyang to detonate more devices as it continues its efforts to attach a nuclear warhead to a ballistic rocket. Trump will hold talks in 5 Asian countries in the coming days, and North Korea will be a major focus. He'll be looking to increase international support for even more sanctions, as Washington says it's running out of time to deal with the regime.
Well, meanwhile, if you're one of Trump's 42 million followers on Twitter, you may be wondering why the president was quiet for some 11 minutes on Thursday. It turns out @RealDonaldTrump was deactivated by a Twitter employee on their last day at the company. Earlier in the day, Twitter issued a statement saying Trump's account was taken down inadvertently by a staff member before an internal investigation pointed to the rogue worker. Trump himself hasn't commented on his brief exit from the realm of social media, but he's been very active since he came back online, talking up tax cuts, bashing Hillary Clinton, and promoting his latest appearance on Fox News. All right, coming up next, the latest from the world of business. All right, let's kick things off with a look at some data out of China today. Activity in the country's service sector picked up in October, but growth is still modest and weaker than historical trends. That's according to a private survey. The data is likely to reinforce worries the world's second-largest economy saw slower growth in the fourth quarter compared to the rest of the year. China's leaders are counting on services and consumption to rebalance their economy from heavy reliance on investment and exports. The services sector accounts for over half of the economy, with rising wages, giving consumers more spending power at home and abroad. Oh, we told you yesterday we're about to see a new Fed chief, and overnight Donald Trump has announced Federal Reserve Governor Jerome Powell will be the man. The president presented Powell at a news conference outside the White House. The 64-year-old lawyer has been Fed governor since 2012 after being nominated by former President Barack Obama. He's supported current Fed Chair Janet Yellen's direction in monetary policy. He's also shared her concern that low inflation justifies a cautious approach to raising interest rates.
So I think Powell would be the closest thing to monetary policy status quo as you can get, short of or next to renominating Yellen. But I think Powell's the base case, not Yellen, because Trump has to be seen as a disruptor and an agent of change, if you will.
Well, a big effect from both those stories on markets. On the mainland, the blue chip Shanghai Shenzhen CSI 300 closed slightly down at 0.13%. Those economic worries clearly playing into investor decisions there. Meanwhile, here in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng index of leading shares added 0.3%, led by tech shares. Powell's appointment on Wall Street strength bled over into offshore trade, while an upgrade on Tencent from Morgan Stanley was one of the big notes of the day. Chipmaker Broadcom is moving its headquarters to the U.S. from Singapore in a move announced yesterday by Donald Trump. The motivation for it is apparently Trump's tax changes. Company CEO Hock Tan said that thanks to the plans, the U.S. was again the best place to lead a business with a global footprint. The company, which makes a range of semiconductor products for wireless communications, smartphones, data center networking, and other markets, is currently incorporated in Singapore and co-headquartered there and in San Jose, California. Its shares fell about 3% after the announcement.
Broadcom Limited is a Fortune 100 company. one of the really great companies. They manufacture technology and parts. They employ over 7,500 American workers in many states across our country. We're looking forward to seeing that number grow very substantially, which is now anticipated.
Now, when it comes to release dates, few companies have been able to compete with Apple. Fans of the tech giant have long been known for their devotion, and it looks like that's still as true as ever. The company today released its much-anticipated iPhone X, and the long lines that were the hallmark of earlier version releases are back. It comes a day after the company reported better-than-expected earnings and offered a rosy forecast for the holiday shopping season. Here's Jane Lee with more.
Does Apple finally have its next big hit in the iPhone X? The tech giant thinks so, and on Thursday forecasts strong revenue for the holiday season. Reuters reporter Stephen Nellis.
Apple tells me that the pre-orders for the iPhone X are off the charts. The question is whether they'll be able to meet the demand for those pre-orders. The company gave guidance of $84 billion to $87 billion in revenue, what could be what Tim Cook calls its best holiday quarter ever, and a strong indication that they will be able to meet a pretty good chunk of that demand.
In Australia and Asia, where the iPhone X went on sales in stores, fans showed up in force on Friday morning local time. At an Apple store in Sydney, 350 people lined up outside the store. The iPhone 8 and 8 Plus had dismal lines, and still Apple said that since its launch, they've become the best-selling iPhones. This is the first time Apple has 3 new phones in the market at the same time. In China, Apple's most important growth market, the revenue slide was finally reversed in the September quarter with a 12% jump compared with the same period last year. The strong earnings and outlook helped boost shares on Friday to record highs, putting Apple closer to $1 trillion market cap future.